In this talk, we will learn about the endocrine system in animals and how it promotes homeostasis. Animals are organisms that belong to the domain of Eukarya and the kingdom of Animalia. All animals are multicellular eukaryotic heterotrophic organisms. The animal body is made up of many different types of organ system, including the nervous system, musculoskeletal system, digestive system, circulatory system, respiratory system, the excretory or urinary system, the endocrine system, the integumentary system, the reproductive system, as well as the immune system. In this talk, we will focus on the endocrine system, which helps maintain homeostasis in the animal body. Homeostasis is the ability of the animal to maintain a balanced and stable internal environment within the body. Different animals have evolved different physiological processes to control their internal environments and thereby maintain homeostasis. This includes maintaining solute concentrations within the body and body fluids, as well as maintaining appropriate levels of water within the body. It also includes maintaining a steady internal body temperature, especially in those animals who are endotherms, like birds and mammals. Hormones play important roles in maintaining homeostasis. They are chemicals that are secreted into the extracellular fluid and carried by blood to different parts of the body. They play important roles in homeostasis by acting at a distance from the source that produces the hormones. There are many different types of hormones, and they can be grouped into three main types. These include the peptides as well as proteins, amino acid derivatives, as well as organic molecules like steroids. The endocrine system comprises of the tissues and organs that are known to secrete hormones. These tissues and organs are ductless and hence secrete the hormones into the extracellular fluid. The hormones are then carried by blood to different parts of the body. The endocrine system is different from exocrine tissues and glands, which secrete their appropriate products into a duct, which is a tube-like structure. When we compare the endocrine and the exocrine systems side by side, we notice that both of them make different types of molecules that are important in physiological processes. Let us focus on the exocrine glands that are known to make secretions like tears, saliva, bile, digestive juices, etc. Let us focus on saliva, which is made by salivary glands that are present in the mouth. The saliva made by the salivary glands are transported to the mouth using the salivary gland ducts. This is different from the endocrine system, where the endocrine tissues and glands do not have any ducts, and hence all the molecules that they produce are directly secreted into the extracellular environment. In order to maintain homeostasis, hormones are involved in feedback loops. Let us take an example where we have a stimulus, which is the change in pH in the duodenum. The duodenum is part of the small intestine, and its pH is normally in the 7 or slightly alkaline range. However, when food from the stomach comes into the duodenum, the pH can drop, resulting in a low pH. This low pH is then sensed by an endocrine cell, which is the S cell present in the duodenum, and results in the secretion of a hormone called as secretin. This hormone then enters the bloodstream and is circulated throughout the body, where ultimately it ends up on target cells, which are present in the pancreas. These target cells then release bicarbonate, and this bicarbonate can then neutralize the low pH in the duodenum. This allows the duodenum to restore its pH. Now, once this has occurred, we no longer have a low pH in the duodenum, and hence no more secretin will be made. This is an example of a negative feedback loop, where there is an inhibition of the response by reducing the initial stimulus. Thus, by changing the pH to what it is supposed to be, there is no more secretion of the hormone. While most feedback loops associated with hormones tend to be negative feedback loops, there are instances of positive feedback loops as well. Let us take the example of an infant that is suckling the breast of its mother in order to obtain milk. In this scenario, the suckling is the stimulus, and it will activate the neurosecretory cells present in the mother. This activation of neurosecretory cells results in the production of the hormone oxytocin. The oxytocin is then circulated throughout the body because it enters the bloodstream and ultimately is able to find the smooth muscle cells present in the mammary glands. There it binds to the receptors present on target cells, and the result is the release of milk. Thus, the response in this scenario is the release of milk from the breast that the infant can feed on. However, this response results in the infant suckling more vigorously onto the breast and results in much more milk being released. This is an example of a positive feedback loop. In positive feedback loops, we see that the stimulus is reinforced in order to produce an even greater response by the hormone. Now that we have learned about the basics of hormones and feedback loops, let us look at the different hormones made by different parts of the endocrine system. Let us begin with the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is present in the brain and right below a structure called as the hypothalamus. The release of hormones from the pituitary gland is controlled by the hypothalamus. Right below the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland appears as two lobe-like structures. It is made of the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. The posterior pituitary arises from the hypothalamus and hence is structurally similar to the hypothalamus, while the anterior pituitary has different embryonic origins. Both the anterior as well as posterior pituitary glands make different types of hormones. The release of hormones from the anterior pituitary is controlled by the neurosecretory cells present in the hypothalamus. In response to stimuli, these neurosecretory cells will release hypothalamic releasing and inhibiting hormones into blood vessels that will carry these hormones into the anterior pituitary. In response to these hormones, we can have the release of hormones like prolactin. In addition to prolactin, there are many other types of hormones that are made by the anterior pituitary gland. Some of these are tropins. Tropins are hormones that can act on other endocrine glands and stimulate them to secrete hormones. An example of a tropin is the thyroid-stimulating hormone. The thyroid-stimulating hormone acts on the thyroid gland to release the hormone called as thyroxine. Another hormone that is produced by the anterior pituitary is growth hormone. Growth hormone promotes the overall growth of young children and adolescents. It does that by stimulating protein synthesis. It promotes the growth of muscles and connective tissues. It stimulates the production of insulin-like growth factors, as well as allows the elongation of bone. In the case of adults, it regulates protein, lipid, as well as carbohydrate metabolism. When there are problems with growth hormone production, it can result to conditions like gigantism or dwarfism. Since the posterior pituitary gland shares embryonic origins with the hypothalamus, it is able to store and release hormones that are made by the neurosecretory cells of the hypothalamus, which extend into the posterior pituitary gland. Some important hormones that are released by the posterior pituitary gland include the antidiuretic hormone, which plays important roles in osmotic balance. It instructs or directs the kidneys to reabsorb water and thus is able to maintain water balance within the animal body. Another hormone that is released by the posterior pituitary gland is oxytocin. Oxytocin is known to promote uterine contractions during labor and milk release after the baby is born. Oxytocin is one of the hormones that is involved in positive feedback loops. Usually, most hormones are involved in negative feedback loops. Another important part of the endocrine system is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus secretes tropins, which are hormones that can regulate the release of other types of hormones from the pituitary. The hypothalamus also acts as the thermostat of the body. There are neurons that are present in the hypothalamus that are able to detect changes in the internal body temperature of animals that are endotherms. These include birds as well as mammals. To see how the hypothalamus is able to regulate body temperature, let us look at the scenario where the body temperature is higher than normal. In this situation, there is the stimulation of a heat-losing center. And what this does is it causes changes in the body that helps with heat loss. For example, dilating the peripheral blood vessels, promoting sweating, which results in the evaporation of water on the body that helps cool the body down. These physiological processes eventually bring down the body temperature. On the other hand, if the body temperature is lower than normal, then the hypothalamus stimulates the heat-promoting center. In this situation, there are physiological processes that are induced, like the constriction of peripheral blood vessels, inducing of shivering, and increasing catabolism. And all of these play a role in generating heat in the body that helps raise the body temperature. A similar principle of generating heat is used during infections when the hypothalamus raises the body temperature to induce a fever, which helps in fighting the infectious agents that are causing the infection. Thus, the hypothalamus plays an important role in regulating body temperature. Let us now have a look at the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland secretes hormones in response to signals obtained from the pituitary. Let us see how this whole process works. It usually begins when there is a drop in the levels of thyroid hormones in the body. This functions as the stimulus, which is then detected by the neurosecretory cells present in the hypothalamus. In response to this stimulus, these cells will secrete the thyrotropin release hormone. The thyrotropin release hormone then goes into the blood and enters the anterior pituitary. It stimulates the anterior pituitary to release the thyroid-stimulating hormone, which enters circulation and is able to be transported throughout the body, where ultimately it reaches the thyroid gland. Within the thyroid gland, the thyroid-stimulating hormone promotes the release of thyroid hormones, which in turn are able to enter the bloodstream and restore the thyroid levels within the body. The thyroid hormones that are usually made are the only hormones that contain iodine. These include thyroxine and triiodothyronine. Both of these hormones play very important roles in metabolism. In addition to these hormones, calcitonin is another hormone made by the thyroid gland. Calcitonin plays important roles in regulating calcium levels, and it promotes the uptake of calcium. Another important part of the endocrine system is the adrenal gland, which is present on top of kidneys. The adrenal gland is able to produce hormones in response to stress. However, this stress is first detected by the anterior pituitary. And in response to this stress, the anterior pituitary secretes the adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. ACTH in turn will act upon the cells of the adrenal cortex and causes the adrenal cortical cells to secrete different types of hormones like corticosteroids. There are different types of corticosteroids, including glucocorticoids like cortisol, which plays important roles in maintaining glucose homeostasis, as well as aldosterone, which is also called as mineralocorticoid and helps regulate the balance of minerals in the body. In addition to responding to signals coming from the anterior pituitary, the adrenal gland is also able to respond to signals of stress coming from the sympathetic nervous system. When this information is relayed to the adrenal gland, the adrenal medullary cells are able to secrete hormones like catecholamines, which include epinephrine and norepinephrine. Another common name for epinephrine is adrenaline, while that for norepinephrine is noradrenaline. These hormones comprise the fight or flight response that is normally seen in response to stress. The pancreas is an organ present in the body that is part of the digestive system. Within the pancreas, we do see that there is an exocrine portion where it's connected to the duodenum of the small intestine by the pancreatic duct. The exocrine portion of the pancreas is able to secrete digestive juices and enzymes that help with digestion. In addition to the exocrine portion, the pancreas also has an endocrine portion called as the islets of Langerhans. These islets of Langerhans are able to produce hormones. These hormones are produced based on the levels of glucose in blood. Insulin is normally produced when the levels of glucose in blood are high, while glucagon is produced when the levels of glucose in blood are low. Insulin is normally produced by the beta cells of the pancreas after a meal when the blood glucose levels are high. The secretion of insulin stimulates the uptake of this glucose present in blood by different cells in the body so that they can use it for their energy requirements. Any excess glucose that is present can be stored as glycogen in liver and muscle cells or as fat in fat cells. Glucagon, on the other hand, is made by the alpha cells present in the islet of Langerhans. Glucagon is usually secreted between meals when the blood glucose level decreases. It promotes the hydrolysis of glycogen in the liver or muscle, as well as the hydrolysis of fat in adipose tissue, so that there's enough glucose present in the blood to sustain the different cellular activities of cells. Thus, the pancreas is able to maintain glucose levels by secreting the hormones insulin and glucagon. The pineal gland is also present in the brain, but is situated at a location different than the pituitary gland. It is located in the roof of the third ventricle of the brain and secretes the hormone melatonin. The secretion of melatonin is activated in the dark, and melatonin helps synchronize various body processes to a circadian rhythm. Thus, melatonin helps humans to sleep at night and be active during the day. The ovaries and testes are reproductive organs of the animal body that make gametes. Ovaries make the female gametes, while testes make the male gametes. In addition to making gametes, these reproductive organs also make hormones called as sex hormones. These sex hormones are steroid hormones because they contain the sterol ring. Some of these hormones include estrogen, progesterone, and androgens like testosterone. All three types of these sex hormones are found in both males and females. However, they are present in different proportions. These sex hormones play a very important role in the development of the reproductive organs as well as secondary sex characteristics of animals, and play important roles in reproduction. With this, we come to the end of our talk where we learned about homeostasis and how the endocrine system plays a role in maintaining homeostasis. We also learned about feedback loops and different parts of the endocrine system and the hormones that they make.